Hi guys, thank you for joining me today. Today I want to talk about grace and mercy. What are grace and mercy? I remember someone defining it this way, and I think this is really powerful. They said that grace is when God doesn't give us what we do deserve, and grace is when God does give us what we don't deserve. So mercy is when God doesn't give us what we do deserve. When we get it wrong, when we do sinful things and wrongful things, we deserve punishment, but God withholds that punishment from us. He shows us mercy. And grace is when God does give us what we don't deserve. God bestows the riches of heaven on us. God bankrupted heaven so that we could have the riches of heaven. The Bible says this: He who knew no sin, Jesus, became sin that we may be the righteousness of God. He took our place. So grace is something that's available to us because Jesus paid a price. Grace is God's gifts and God's riches and God's blessing, is bestowing a royal honour upon us at Christ's expense. Grace, grace, God's riches at Christ's expense. I think that's a really helpful way to remember grace, and it's grace that has the power to transform us. I was just thinking about the apostle and church leader Paul, who he knew a life of suffering, of struggle, of tribulation, and at one point Paul says, I have a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan. I'm struggling with something. We don't know what it is. Paul doesn't tell us. It could be some kind of infirmity, some kind of illness, some kind of physical struggle. We're not quite sure. But Paul says he went to God and asked God to take it away from me. He said, please remove this from me. 3 times he went back, that kind of persistence of returning to God and petitioning and asking over and over again. And he says that God said this to him. He said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in your weakness. My grace is sufficient for you. It's his grace that's sufficient. That word sufficient doesn't mean just enough, but it means ample. It's overflowing. I have given you sufficient grace. I've given you ample, plenty of grace. And I want you to walk in that grace. That grace is going to be the thing that gives you strength when you struggle with infirmities. And it's actually the very struggles that turn our eyes towards his grace. And it's his grace that brings us power. It helps us understand how blessed we are, and to have a God that loves us and cares for us and bestows riches upon us. God's riches at Christ's expense. Grace. So my encouragement today is to walk in his grace, walk in his forgiveness. The Christian walk is a walk where we do often get it wrong. We often make mistakes. We ignore God. We don't listen to God. We don't prioritize God. We do things that we know are wrong, and we sometimes hurt other people. We hurt ourselves. But we know God's grace, and it goes on and on. But every step of the journey, grace isn't just something that we get at the beginning of our Christian walk to kind of forgive us of our past sins and transform us, and thereon we don't need it. No, grace is something that we need for every single step of the journey. It's something that we need every day to kind of be renewed and continue in his grace. So that's my encouragement for you today. Thank you for joining me. God bless you guys. Take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.